There's no clock here, but I time myself, so you have the same app there. Okay. How does it work? Like that? Off I go. All right, very nice to be in Tallinn. I'll talk about data, people and cities. That's the topic of the day. But I start with this one word, which is sort of a basis for most of the things we do, which is entropy, the third law of thermodynamics, which means that everything goes towards disorganization. So everything in the universe tries to enter the state of chaos. And I think that's something we need to respect when we talk about cities. I utterly hate engineering dreams, smart city ideas, where people claim that they solve a city, that the city is solvable. City is first and foremost a community of people, and I don't know how you can solve a community. I mean, what's the solution for a community? So we might mistake ourselves, especially architects, to think that city is buildings and infrastructure and transport, etc. But no, it's not. Those are there to support the city, which actually consists of people. So that's the sort of a basic baseline for this. So I think when we talk about making cities smart, we try to manage entropy to some extent. But we never can solve a city. There are bad examples of that. I'll show you some. So cities, people and data. I lead Forum Virium Helsinki. We're the innovation company of the city of Helsinki. So not a civil servant. I like an entrepreneur within the city organization trying to digitalize the city, the way it operates. And I feel a bit awkward coming to Estonia to talk about doing city services or public services right, because you are one of the few nations in the world which has sort of done it more or less right. I don't know any other examples actually in which, like President Ilves says, the architecture side of things is understood as well as here. But there's still lots to do also in Estonia and everywhere else, and I'll talk a bit about that as well. The fact is that no matter how well you've done things in Tallinn or Estonia, if we think about the market and the landscape ecosystem of city solutions, urban solutions, those things you've done here should be compatible with those we do in Helsinki or those we do in Paris. And that's a landscape which we don't have yet. I have worked a lot with living labs. So just as I mentioned, that the European Network of Living Labs, I chaired that for a few years with the idea to empower everyone to innovate. So I do have a bit of a romantic mindset about creativity of communities. I believe a lot in that. But let's start with another basic claim for the talk, which is that smart cities, as we know them, there are hardly any in the world which are realized, are basically failed. So we did that wrong in the first round, and now we should do it right in the second round. And why that is that smart cities started as this sort of a technology dreams. That's Abu Dhabi, a Masdar, city of Masdar, how it should look like. And that's a tech dream. That's a redesigned city. Everything is redesigned. You take a plot of land and you start from the new. What happens is that this is actually Masdar. There's only one block ready, the middle block there. Everything else is empty. And these tech dreams of smart cities don't seem to catch up. For several reasons. They are quite often one company dreams. Somebody thinks that this is the way we want to do things and forgets about everything else. They create unequal city development, that you develop one area and will forget about the rest of the urban community. They focus on certain business sectors. And then, first and foremost, they don't scale, because then everybody else should buy the same. And that's not something cities do. For several reasons, one of these, which is that cities are very different. And most fast-growing cities in the world are not like Masdar at all. They are like Dar es Salaam. That's a very, very vital business hub called Tandale in Dar es Salaam. Place of local entrepreneurs, place of meetings, and it's a totally unplanned plot, several hectares big, in middle of Dar es Salaam. How do you bring solutions for Masdar there? The thing which they have is the community, and that's all they have, and it works well. But it doesn't work because of smart grids or anything like that. How do you make that smart, or even smarter than it is? It's already pretty smart. And that's where the growth is. So if you look at the list of future megacities, which is of course our market as well, if you think of the Nordic countries, which Estonia is sort of part of that group, these are not the places where cities grow. Cities grow most everywhere else except in Europe. Of course, we still have some urbanization to be done, in Finland especially, having a central party in the government for so long, so it's pretty agrarian still. But nevertheless, look at the list. Most of those cities are these organic or sort of a chaos cities in which people just move. Delhi, Sao Paulo, Mumbai. That's the core of urbanization. That's where you have to take your smart solutions. And then, of course, we have the tech dreams, and they don't really cope well with the pressure which the rapid urbanization puts on them. That's the 60s dream from Brazil, that this is the way we solve housing. That's what it turned out to be. The mass of people, we have to have really robust structures, robust ways to work in urban community to be able to cope with the pressure which the urban community creates. And high tech tends to be fragile. So how do we build robust, smart cities? Then, of course, most of the cities are cities like Tallinn or Helsinki or any other European city. They are sort of, they've been there. Nobody has thought that they should be maybe using technology to any large extent. And we have to retrofit our solutions to work in these cities. And that's the vast majority of global cities. And that's the key reason why the first wave of smart cities has failed. We don't have a greenfield area. We have an existing city. We have to embed our solutions there. We have lots of stuff we bought ages ago, which should be compatible with the stuff we are doing now. And we necessarily can't scrap it. That's the average ICT system of a city. It's not Helsinki, it's a smaller place. Helsinki ICT system wouldn't fit in that picture. That's luckily something which you partly managed to escape in Estonia, because you did start actually from a clean desk a couple of decades ago. But those are the ICT systems and the smart systems of Finnish cities. They are like that. How do you build that into a smart system, harmonized, well-functioning, and holistic? So in this landscape, we just should now solve the cities. And I have 4 points I'm going to make, and the first one is that the way to tackle the complexity and the sort of brokenness of the current existing urban solutions landscape is to work with the urban community itself. To understand that the city is not the organization, the city is us. And people are very good at doing stuff together. Especially now when we have user interfaces everywhere. We have urban screens, we have mobile phones. We use the city in a different way than we used to. Now when you come to a foreign city, what do you do first? You start to search for things. You don't go on the main street and start to walk from one end to the other. No, you actually search for points in which you want to go, and they can be in really obscure places, and yet you feel like you can find them because you have the means for that. We carry an urban interface in our pockets. And that means that things are moving to these service platforms which combine the bricks and the bits. We are getting service platforms for most areas of services we are using. Well, Uber is, of course, a very clear case of a service platform. It's global taxi service. But we have also other areas. Patients like me is a service for sick people. No matter which illness they have, they find their peers here. And it serves them beautifully. We have service platforms for easy making of groceries. That's a curbside, which is both physical service and a digital service. You buy your groceries and you fetch them easily from the supermarket courtyard. And then, of course, we have these big platforms which we didn't have a few years back. The biggest accommodation chain in the world, Airbnb, has 0 flats. They have no flats. Yet it's the biggest market for accommodation globally, by far. And only a few years ago, it didn't exist. So they grow at internet speeds. And I think what the cities must understand is that we should work with these new forms of urbanization. We should work with the communities so that when we design the services for the city, it's not the civil servants and city employees and taxpayers' money we have, but it's also the taxpayers themselves we can work with. We have proofs of that, 2 examples from Helsinki. The restaurant day, in which the whole city, 4 times a year, turns into a massive restaurant, started as a civil rebellion movement against too strict restaurant rules, and now we have about 1,000 pop-up restaurants 4 times a year. And it's spreading to other parts of the world as we speak. And then there's a cleaning day, in which the city turns into a flea market, 3,500 a few weeks back when it was the last time the cleaning day was organized. People are swapping goods on the streets. And they find the restaurants and the flea markets in the most obscure places because they use guidance tools, smartphones we have in our pockets to find them. So, here's an example of how we can use such a power to actually pretty important things. This is the World Bank project from Tandale, the place I showed you a picture before. That's the map of Tandale which Google gives you. That's what Google can do. That's Tandale. It's hard to plan if you have that level of information. You don't really know what's there. In 1 month, this is what the people did. That is the real Tandale. That's Google, and that's the community. You have the map, you know where things are. You can discuss them, you can plan them, you can work with them. And it's been community mapped by a couple of dozen smartphones using OpenStreetMaps. And now the World Bank is doing this all over the world in the unplanned communities, because you need that when you want to work with the community to discuss, for example, where do you actually put the lavatories? How should we make this a better place to live? How do we solve the transportation issues we have here? Map helps. And that's not something which a corporation can give you, but the community can. There are things which can be done by the urban community which are impossible to be done by any other. Think about Wikipedia. Which company could have published that? So there's lots of power in the community, and the city should enable that. So that this is the City of Helsinki ICT strategy. That idea is that city owns and defines something that actually most urban innovations and services are done by the community. We monitor what happens, and we can decide to drive and support new things which take up. Right. Which brings us then to civic hackers and openness. So how can the city be an enabler? This is point number 2. And first, why should we care about that is that the good things I mentioned about horizontal service platforms and about the speed of the internet to lift new things off the ground are also, of course, like everything, they have negative effects as well. One is that the internet creates monopolies faster than we've ever seen before. So Airbnb, in fact, is a kind of a peer accommodation monopoly already. In the old times, they might have been sued, but now I don't think anyone had the time yet to think about that. Google is in sort of a trouble now with the European Commission but years after they have created a dominant marketplace. So it's all about critical mass. That's what everybody's searching for, and that's where the business is. You create a critical mass with whichever way is possible, and then you have the critical mass and you take over the rest. That's why Amazon doesn't create profit, because they put all the money they get into growing, because then they can dominate the marketplace. Just like in the old days, monopolies don't change, no matter if they are digital monopolies or oil companies. They still act the same. And the cities should be aware of the fact that if we think of Airbnb, it sounds nice, it is cool, but then it's also killing local hotels, and the money goes to the US. Okay, some of it stays with the flat owners, but the actual big income goes to the company who owns the platform. So it's not a minor issue who manages these platforms. And of course, from the European perspective, the problem is that they are all from the US at the moment, so it's not very good for our competitiveness in the long run, that most of the big platform operators are from Silicon Valley and New York. And second, of course, when you introduce new tech, I mean, this is something which was already covered several times today. When you introduce new tech in an urban structures, you create risks because they can be misused. That's a famous case from, I think, a couple of months back when hackers hacked a sniper rifle. There was a rifle on the market which is horribly accurate. You can shoot people with it from kilometers away. And it's hackable over Wi-Fi. It has one fixed password, like a real high pinnacle of data security. This, like a kid with a smartphone can hack it. And I think it's when we do these solutions in our cities, it's necessary to understand that besides, like we need architects for city planning, we need nerds for digitalization, and we need them in-house. There must be people in our governments and in our cities who understand in depth what this all means. So that's why we have to discuss and work with developers. Developers are like lead users of digitalization. No matter how clever people you have working for the city of Tallinn or the government of Estonia, still the majority of smart people are not working in the government. It's just a mathematical fact. So it makes sense to join with the best and to do active developer collaboration. We have the Helsinki Loves Developers program. And then there are the Code Fellow programs, started from Code for America and now spread all over the world, in which actually embed nerds in the administration to work with data. And second, they need food. I mean, nerds live with food, live with data, so data is the food for nerds. So the cities must be open by default. Open data, open processes, and open interfaces. What that creates, the Helsinki Region InfoShare is the project we've run. We've published 1,358 datasets as we speak. I think we are #1 in Europe. And what we get is innovations. There's Blind Square. Blind Square is the audio guide for the blind people, turning open data into the best audio guide in the world. And now the guy is turning that into Chinese, so now it becomes also a tourist guide. And then it creates efficiency and transparency. We opened all the decision-making data of Helsinki last year, including the spending, each and every receipt. What happened was that the main newspaper, Helsingin Sanomat, ran a series of stories about horrible public spending. And several civil servants were like blamed for waste of public money. And then they interviewed the mayor, like, what do you think now? Do you have any regrets? Like, was that a stupid move? And he said that, in average, if people civil servants spend the taxpayers' money in Helsinki 2% more responsibly when they sign the bills, because they know that this can be checked like the next day by the newspaper. If they are 2% more responsible, that means 60 million euros a year. So, no regrets. I mean, a few press stories, fine. We can live with that. And third, we should have a home for these people. We should use the laboratory system and agile methods to design our cities. Who of you are in software business in any kind of way? Well, a few. I knew that you might be. When you use the net nowadays, Facebook or Google or whichever, you are all being tested all the time. Google runs about, I think, 2,000 or so A/B tests every day. Each of you get a different page, and they compare different alternatives with each other. They don't assume anything because it's so easy to test. So why make assumptions? Yet, when we do public systems, we mostly do this defining period of 2 or 3 years, and then we do this procurement bit of 1 year, and then we come up with a clumsy system, which we could have seen it in the year 1 if we had done a little prototype and actually tested the thing we want to buy. You can test different things. Very hands-on tests are done. That's the Times Square, 2009, when they tested if anyone would sit there by blocking the traffic and introducing 300 chairs. And yes, people sat there, and nowadays that area is blocked of traffic. And despite the taxi drivers claiming that whole transport system of Manhattan will collapse if that is done, that didn't happen because the test proved it doesn't happen. I mean, traffic is like water, it always finds a new route. In Helsinki Living Lab, we are also testing things and we try to become more experts in testing. That's one of the problems with public sector piloting and prototyping, is that it's done a lot actually, but in most cases the testing itself is not very professional. So we do a pilot and yet we don't draw conclusions of it, and we don't really measure the results well enough, and we don't compare different alternatives well enough. We just, oh wow, that was a nice test. So how can we be more systematic about testing? That's a thing we are developing in Helsinki Living Lab. I skip that. Here's a case of Kutsu Plus, which is the demand-driven bus of Helsinki. Kutsu Plus is basically it's an algorithm. So how it works is that it's a series of minibuses which have no fixed routes, and they auction rides between buses. So when you express a wish that I want to travel from there to there, you pay differently depending on if you want to go there fast, you pay a bit more. If you have more time and you can take a bit more detour, you pay less. And then the algorithm auctions different buses against each other and tries to find out which bus can pick up that particular customer. And they reroute themselves all the time. You can go from any bus stop to any bus stop. If you pay more, it's a taxi speed. If you pay less, it's like a bus speed. And it's worked beautifully. It's very expensive though, because we bought all the buses. So I'm not sure if it will continue. But what if we take that proven way of routing buses and take it to places like Colombia, Mexico, where they have tens of thousands of vans driving around the city, and we retrofit all of that with Kutsupu software. That's a very different market then, because the buses are already there. They just could be a bit more smart. Our key project in the smart city pilot things is the Kalasatama, so it's a massive new development, few million square kilometers, or not quite million, but hundreds of thousands. And the vision for Kalasatama is 1 more hour for your day. So that's a smart city vision for the area. The idea is pretty simple, that the core is the citizen, the person who lives there, who can save time through better functioning city, through all kinds of different tools. And we do smaller and larger labs and pilots. That's the container service center there, because it was lacking one. So we've tested temporary service centers in which you can get all the basic stuff, even though the area is still under construction. Piggyback tries to turn it into a business. Let's see if it flies. It worked well in the pilot phase. And I'll close this part with the new project which is just starting. And if there are other corporate people here, are there people from SMEs who are from SMEs who do some sort of tech or anything? Architects at least. Are you all architects, by the way? Mostly. I used to be one, ages back. Select for cities is a project we are starting now with Antwerp and Barcelona, in cities of Internet of Everything labs. The topic is not unique. What is unique in Select with Antwerp and Barcelona is that we are going to do this project, it's a European Union funded thing, but it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge competition for solution providers. So it's not a European project in a traditional way in which we have certain number of partners and then we do something and then it either flies or it doesn't. We open it as a challenge. And then we'll probably hopefully get dozens and dozens and dozens of proposals with which we start to then work and to distill the best ones. Okay, last thing. I said in the start already that no matter how clever solutions you have here in Tallinn or Estonia, if they don't work elsewhere, there's no business. So I think the key point for smart cities is how do we build a smart city market? We don't have a smart city market now, unless you consider tailor-making a product for each and every city differently a market. I don't think it's a market. A market is when you can go from one city to the other and your solution works. And for that, oops, something happened, it doesn't work. Help. So there are not umpteen slides, a few slides there, but the clicker doesn't work. What can I do? Okay, somebody switch. I just say switch then if it still doesn't work. So one city is not a market. What do we do? Okay, click again. There is a market if we get the critical mass. That's City Mapper. Who's used it? Few people. So City Mapper is the best, one of the best mobility apps there is. And the trick of City Mapper is that it works in London, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, you name it. And that makes it very good because you've had millions and millions and millions of test users, so the app has become really good. But it's only one area which is currently harmonized. And we should harmonize the rest. And the challenge is that when we think about harmonization, we often think about this sort of integrated systems. But actually, for us, for cities, it's enough that they build a loosely coupled system. That our data links with the data of the other city when it's necessary. It's not integrated. It's not the same system. It's not in the same platform. It just uses the interface when it's needed. So loose coupling is the way to go. And we tried it in a project called City SDK, in which we had 8 European cities and we harmonized tourism, citizen feedback and transport data, coming up with a basically simple idea that we built the interface and then we get the developers to build the apps. And no matter which app you use, in no matter which city, we make sure that the interface takes the information, like in case of participation, to the departments which need to work with it. And that created immediately nice-looking solutions like the Metro magazine feedback app, which is very popular in Amsterdam and Helsinki. You can report different problems with the urban community. And everybody wins here because it's very hard for a city to get that amount of users the Metro magazine has to their website. Because Metro is a media. And of course for Metro it's nice for them to be able to serve the citizens better, so it's customer loyalty for them. It's a win-win situation. So, better roaming city services. And I close with 2 things I want to invite Estonia and the cities here to join. First is the Open and Agile Smart Cities Network, started early this year, and that's a network of currently 61 cities. 61 cities in 8 months, pretty fast, which devote to the stuff I've spoken about, so open data, open APIs compatible across cities, experimentation culture, and shared data models. So that when Tallinn publishes data about transport, for example, it wouldn't be in Estonian and with a totally different structure than the same data in Helsinki. But we would build a metadata layer which is compatible. Because those things are enough to build the interoperability. And yes, we have now 61 cities who have signed that, and we are starting to roll out City SDK kinds of interfaces between these cities in the next year. And second, second one is Finest Twins, and that's a project we are doing now with you guys. We have €500,000 and 1 year to come up with a plan. That's paid by the Commission. And the plan should be the winning and the first twin city, smart city center of excellence between Estonia and the greater Helsinki region. First in the world between 2 geographical regions. Shared operation between Estonia and the Helsinki region. And when we come up with a plan which is absolutely a killer plan, what we'll get is about 35 to 40 million euro operation for the next 5 to 7 years. The center will be located in Tallinn. It's a Tallinn University, which is the partner. Aalto University from Helsinki, and then we have the Estonian government and the greater Helsinki municipalities and the Finnish government as our partners there. And we are now at the process of building this up, at the process of doing this plan, which will be so good that we get the jackpot. The odds are pretty good. We won the project out of 290 applicants, 31 got the first stage funding, and out of those 31, 9 will get the second stage. So we have close to 1 to 3 opportunity, but we need to beat, of course, 20 other proposals, or 22 other proposals. There are only 2 projects in smart cities area. It was a research call which covered all areas of science and innovation, so there were projects from well-being to biomedicine to whichever, and Budapest and the Helsinki-Tallinn combo are bidding for smart city theme. And one of them pretty certainly will get it, so that's it for me. Let's beat Budapest and make the best project. Thanks. That's the point.